Alright, hello and welcome to Camel Finance. I'm your boy Camel, and I often say things can change and they can change quickly, and as of yesterday they appear to have changed quite quickly. At least that's what the general consensus is. But as always, we're going to come at this like pros. We are going to have no emotions, no bias. We're just going to look at the chart because remember, the chart is the truth. The price is the truth. Everything else is just noise in the meantime. I'm seeing some absurd calls for 10k and whatever. I'm seeing people claim that Binance is going to blow up. Anyway, I've got primarily two pieces of news to go over. So very briefly, we'll touch on Apple and then we're going to go on to Binance and deal with this whole Bitcoin saga. So Apple released its keynotes or whatever it's called for its new VR AR headset. And I just got this 10-second clip here because despite the technology, despite what most people think about it, everyone seems to have gotten hung up on the price. The price tag of this thing, if you don't know, is about $3,500. And check this reaction out.
Apple Vision Pro starts at $34.99. It will be available early next year on Apple.com and at Apple retail stores.
So people aren't happy, but let's not pretend like people aren't going to queue around the corners of blocks to get one of these on pre-release or early release or whatever the thing is. It's Apple. At the end of the day, they always have this cult following. I'm sure that whilst a lot of people would have rather this been the same price as an iPhone, I mean, all of this stuff's really expensive, right? Like it's $1,000 for a phone. You don't have to pay that, but people choose to because they got that brand stuff going on. And ultimately people, once they switch to their devices, they don't want to leave. But anyway, people are not happy about that, as you can see by that reaction. If you're wondering what this means for Bitcoiners, here's a 3-second clip that hopefully... So yeah, if you're a Bitcoiner like I am, then you can of course get one of these headsets and enjoy watching the Binance FUD unfold right in front of our eyes. So speaking of Binance, let's dig in here, okay? Yesterday, the SEC has announced that it's going to sue Binance and the CEO, CZ, for breaching securities laws. And this is causing a bit of a stir. It's caused the price to sell off a bit. But what I'm going to show you in a minute is, I think this is actually really quite bullish. The chart is not having some huge panic sell-off, even though there are people calling for 10k. If you're a bear, then you really need to see significant drawdown off the back of this, because if Binance being sued by the SEC can't pull the price much lower, then nothing is going to, right? So initially on the news, we had the BNB token sell off quite drastically, as you can see. We also had a bunch of people withdrawing their Bitcoin from Binance. This was the third biggest outflow of this year. It's leading people to say things like, let's see if Binance can handle the withdrawals. Well, I mean, we know they've got proof of reserves. I really don't think this is going to be an issue. I'm sure that they can handle these withdrawals, no problem at all. But of course, in times like this, it is better safe than sorry. It's better to get your coins off exchanges and onto cold wallets, particularly if you're not intending on trading with them anytime soon. So as I sort of alluded to a moment ago, the SEC suing Binance is your last chance if you're a bear. Because if you can't break 20k here, you're never going to. I mean, what else do you need, right? They're suing Binance. If we can't get the price sub 20k, then it's definitely absolute roaring bull market territory. This whole saga has left some people speculating that the reason the SEC is going after Binance is because they know they're about to lose the case to Ripple and XRP. So it'll be interesting to see if there's any merit to this. I don't want to speculate. I don't really care, to be honest. But here is a nice summary from Timothy Peterson, and I'll start with the end, okay? Timothy has provided regulatory consulting to asset managers for a decade. So this puts him rather uniquely qualified to comment on this whole saga. And here's what he had to say. All SEC enforcement actions are civil, not criminal. They sue to get fines, and a judge can order the defendant to stop breaking the law. That's it. No jail, no SWAT raids, nothing like it. It's simply a shakeout and a politicized suppression action, part of Operation Chokepoint 2.0. Binance has minimal presence in the US, so US investors are hardly even impacted. The US has almost no way of practically enforcing any ruling because Binance operates outside the US and therefore it can do as it pleases. It does not answer to US entities. It's doubtful the US could even collect any fines, and therefore international investors are hardly even impacted. To win its case, the SEC must prove that certain tokens are in fact securities. This means definitions, etc., in a way that is supported by a preponderance of evidence. This is a difficult hurdle to overcome. The XRP Ripple case plays into this directly. Again, more speculation around that. The worst possible outcome is that the SEC wins, right? And there's a court-approved template for applying securities laws to crypto, which opens the paths going forward. And keep in mind, that the US Supreme Court greatly limits the fines that the SEC can collect. And whatever that fine may be, CZ and Binance can certainly afford it. This is pocket change to them. So don't believe the hype, don't believe the FUD. This is not a big deal. And as you'll see just a minute when we get to the charts, I'm actually quite happy with this. We were needing to see direction from Bitcoin. We've got it. We know where the next cycle low comes from. So anyway, we'll get to that in just a moment. But keep this in mind, right? The SEC versus Binance is negligible. The cycle was already leaning lower into mid to late June. It's interesting that's what Bob's got because I had late June to early July. Again, I'll show you the chart in a minute. A catalyst to nudge the direction of least resistance. That's all this is. But it does help move sentiment to where it needs to be for that eventual cycle low to form. And of course, you know what comes after that cycle low? We get big roaring rallies. So a little bit of patience, no problem. And just remember that when Bitcoin was at 30K, there was a bunch of people, probably including some of the viewers, swearing that if the price would just drop back to 25K, they would buy. But now it's here. Most people, they don't want to pull the trigger, right? And this is the difference between retail and pros. Are you able to detach your emotions? Are you able to just look at the chart and see what the truth is? So from FUD to one piece of good news before we get into the charts, El Salvador is launching a $1 billion Bitcoin mining project. The power will be generated by a mix of solar and wind energy with a total capacity of 241 megawatts. This will be one of the largest Bitcoin mining farms, pumping out 1.3 exahashes per second. So again, Bitcoin doesn't care. Like all attacks, Bitcoin will shrug this one off. This isn't really even an attack on Bitcoin, is it? This is just a US government entity creating a shakeout, likely so that the big boys can load up again. So let's hop straight into Bitcoin. First things first, we've had to pay a stop here. No problem there. Second thing I want to point out is that this cycle low, I was talking about it in the last couple of videos. I said if we were going to break out, we needed to do it this week. Otherwise, we'd have to scratch this one off. Given the price action, given that we've run the lows, I think it's safe to say we're certainly not going to do that. And instead, we're going to be moving this arrow down to somewhere in this neighborhood, right? So the third thing to point out here is when to attack. It's in my personal opinion, for me at least, I'm going to be looking to either add longs on a daily cycle low if we get something like this due around the 11th of July before we can then go higher, or invalidation of this will come from a trend line break if we can break this blue trend line. Now, I don't think that's likely. I think what's much more likely is we're going to do something like this, then get a flush into that cycle low and go, and that's where you'll see me get long and add all my exposure back. The next thing I want to point out is if we grab this horizontal line and extend it out, what you will notice is we have made a near perfect back test of the range breakout. You see this range breakout? We've also got some people pointing out that this is a inverse head and shoulders pattern. And now all we've done is broken out of the neckline and retested it perfectly. I've been talking on and off about this. Some level of wick here would be acceptable, would be normal, would be expected. But particularly if we can hold this, that's incredibly bullish. I also want to point out that we have a well-established uptrend here. Let's color this red so we can see what's going on. And I've been talking on and off about this as well, that we can come all the way back down to a touch of this red upward sloping support line. As long as we hold it, we are still maintaining bullish structure. So it would not at all surprise me to see something like this, it drop down into that cycle low and then go. That makes perfect sense to me. And that is why I am more than happy to add my exposure back when we get this cycle low for Bitcoin show up in about 4 weeks time. The last thing I want to point out before I move off of this is you have to admit, like, the SEC suing Binance, that's quite a big deal in terms of the ability of the media to create a FUD campaign. And all we really got was this drawdown into support. So this could certainly get worse. This could certainly spend some time in this washing machine before we make a decision again. But we do know that what always happens out of these cycle lows, when they show up, is we get some level of upside action. So I'm sure patience is going to be rewarded. It is important to point out where we were wrong. We lose this upward sloping red support line. That's break of bullish structure. That is a very bearish thing to see. I don't personally expect it, but if it happens, it's important to understand that we are likely in for significant pain going forward. Notice how Ethereum completed a breakout, retest with a trap, and now potentially looking for resumption. So this not nearly as bearish as Bitcoin's price action. XRP still holding above this green zone. So again, still bullish, not too bad. When we flip into the crypto-related equities, you can see Coinbase relatively unscathed, sideways, right? MicroStrategy sold off a bit, possibly going to run the stop on the second position. But again, we've got this upward sloping yellow support line, so I don't expect us to break down much below that. Riot, again, relative strength, holding the range breakout just like Bitcoin is. No problem there. And Marathon is exactly the same story, isn't it? Marathon still holding this range breakout, still maintaining bullish structure. So far, the bears have had what should be for them a dream come true, and they've only managed to pull the price back down into the most logical area of support on the entire chart, which is this range breakout in yellow. So I really don't think it's that bad. However, given where we have the cycle, given that this low has now taken out the prior cycle low, this counts as a failed cycle, which tells us we have to be open to seeing some more chop into that next 60-day cycle low. However, as I've said multiple times, when we get there, I believe that this is going to be a violent rally out of this cycle low. And the main reason for that is we have 1 daily cycle, 2 daily cycles, 3 daily cycles, all in a strong, powerful uptrend. Usually on the 4th daily cycle, we get a rollover into a weekly cycle low, and then this whole trend can repeat again. And that is what Bob Lucas is referring to here. We've got a 26-week weekly cycle, which is comprised of those 4 60-day daily cycles. And so the reset into this final daily cycle low should yield massive opportunity going forward. So we know our levels, we know we've got to be patient, but once we get down here, that's how we go on the attack again. That is how we profit from these markets with the most amount of potential. And in the meantime, we let the stops do the worrying. You'll notice as well, so let me make this clear as well. If you're new here, so you'll notice I had a Bitcoin long, which we got stopped out on. I've just taken that one off. I also had an Ethereum long, as you can see, which is still in play. And then I also added a Coinbase long, which is still there, a MicroStrategy position, which is still there, a Riot position, and a Marathon position, which are all still available. Now, let's be really clear. The risk, if I get stopped down every single one of these positions, was only 2% of my total account. So it might, if I have to pay, 8 stops? No, it's 6 stops. If I have to pay 6 stops all in one go because they're correlated, the initial impression might be, what the hell, Camel just got wrecked. But no, I didn't get wrecked because I sized my positions appropriately. The risk if all of these positions get stopped, because of course if one gets stopped as they're correlated, they likely will all get stopped. The risk on all of them are 2% of my total account. So even if I pay 6 full stop losses here, I will only lose 2% of my total account. But this also illustrates the point. Did you notice how so far I've got 6 positions giving me exposure to the Bitcoin cycle low, and only Bitcoin is stopped out at the moment. So this is why I prefer, instead of to go all in and put 2% of my total account in the stop loss for this first position, then I would have lost the full 2%. Right? But as it stands right now, I haven't lost the full 2%. In fact, the vast majority of my 2% of risk is still open and is sat around break even for most of these trades. So this is why, and this is a great illustration of why I choose to play the Bitcoin cycle low using 4 crypto related equities, Bitcoin and Ethereum, instead of just going and putting full exposure and full risk on just Bitcoin. Because had I have done that in this case, as you can see, that would be stopped out and me back to neutral. But I still have some exposure in case we decide to do something like this. Again, that's not very likely given where the cycle is, but it's a market, anything can happen. So this has actually turned out to be a great illustration of why I play the market in this manner. Since we're in the charts, we'll have a quick look at the rest of it. Look, here's the S&P 500. The S&P 500 is looking like, in terms of its cycle, it's going to do what I wanted Bitcoin to do. Notice we've come out of this cycle low, we've started to push up higher, and now we can expect this to roll over into a daily cycle low and look to go again out of here. Now, does it form as high up as I've got it marked, or do we end up having to pull this down and put it here as a retest of the purple support, or maybe even all the way down here as a retest of the red upward sloping support line? As long as we're above that, we are still maintaining bullish structure. So we just have to sit back, relax, not get emotional, and let the market give us what the market's going to give us. Wherever we get this pullback into that daily cycle low, I believe that becomes an opportunity to add again, because I believe this chart is going to morph into a look which is much more melt-up-esque, which is much more like the NASDAQ is doing. So as we pull down into that daily cycle low, due around the same time as Bitcoin's cycle low, which is the late end of this month into early July, it's reasonable to expect the NASDAQ to pull back down into one of these supports as well. But so far, so good. We still have the VIX down below 15 at the moment. We still have the VIX bleeding down to where I believe will be the low teens. Let's move the goalpost slightly. It's probably going to look a bit more like that. And once we get down there, we should see the stock market putting in its final blow off top portion of the rally. Some spikes in the medium term, probably likely because we know we've got that cycle low coming. So we'll probably will get a pull down into that cycle low at the end of this month or early July. And that will cause a small VIX spike. But I do not believe that will be the end of the world or the end of this rally. I believe that that just sets us up for one final dip buy before all of the stock charts start to morph into looks like this. Apple made a slight higher high above its all-time high, as you can see here, and then given the news, it's taken a bit of a pullback. But it's the same rinse and repeat story for Apple, isn't it? If we're above these blue and yellow upward sloping support lines, then there's no reason to exit the long. All the while we can hold this, it's reasonable to just expect us to pull back and then go again, pull back and go again. If we can get an all-time high break, we could go into price discovery, and this chart could start to look a lot like Nvidia did just recently. As ever, one day at a time. Like I said, as long as we're above the supports, then I have no problem pushing this trade. And then just before we go, here's gold. Okay, I know a lot of you like gold. I'm kind of gone off this market at the moment because I just think it's got some work to do. I think it's got some work to do. It had a crack, it had a third attempt at the all-time high, and it couldn't break it. Since then, we've pulled back into support. Now, we're currently still maintaining an uptrend. We're currently still above this blue upward sloping support line, but we're also undeniably creating a downward sloping red resistance line. So if you're a bull here, you want to see this come up here and then have a fourth crack at breaking the all-time high. If that's what we're going to do, then Camel will get long on an all-time high break and target 3K. But my expectation really is that we are going to see this dive down lower. And the reason I say that is because why gold now? If the stocks really are going to do what I think they're going to do, and if they're going to continue to put in this big blow off top move, if they're going to continue to get more and more bullish, because remember, all it would take for the NASDAQ is a pullback and all the bears will be declaring victory again. But then this is likely going to hold, whether it's the yellow or the red, it's likely going to hold and then continue to explode up. And it will do that likely as the S&P does something like this, drop into its cycle low and then go. And at that point, how do you maintain bearish posture in the US equities? I mean, that rally won't make sense. There'll be a million reasons to be bearish. But if we're going to have this big risk on moment, and we've got the likes of Apple and Nvidia breaking out to all-time highs or having a crack at breaking out to all-time highs, I just don't see why people would want to de-risk their portfolio and hedge their portfolio with gold whilst it's up at near all-time high valuations. So to my mind, if we are indeed going to get this blow off top in risk, then it kind of makes sense that gold would have one more puke lower before then it can break out as the equity rally tops. For me, that is where I will be looking to rotate really heavily out of equities and into gold and particularly silver. But of course, we could certainly see in the more bullish scenario for gold, we could see us hold this trend line and break out, in which case we'll just enter the breakout at the top there. And there's a good 50% rally from down there. So it's not a big difference, to be honest. This is my preferred look down here, obviously. And therefore, it's sort of the same with silver, isn't it? So this kind of speaks to rollover, rejection at resistance, one more dip down to follow gold down there. And then again, I think we can get super, uber, duper long down the bottom. And miners will probably look the same, right? The gold mining stocks, the junior miners probably going to get some kind of wiggle down here. And the same for the silver miners, some wiggle lower one last time. And then we can break out. And then I think that breakout entry will be the time to go and add the miners to your longer term trading accounts, to your pension accounts. That's certainly what I'm going to be doing, as well as getting leverage positions in my leveraged account on, because I think this will be the time to go. I think once, assuming we can get that final dip down, I do believe that will be the final dip. Before then, it's time to rally up here, break the all-time high, and then go straight to 3K. That's what I think is likely. That's what I think is coming. But as ever, one day at a time, and we'll see what the market can give. I'm your boy Camel. If you found value here today, I'd appreciate it if you could drop a like on the video, subscribe if you're not already, turn the notifications on if you want to continue to get updates on all these markets and how I handle them in real time as a pro swing trader, including trade setups called out ahead of time for free. If you want to get some extra special trade setups called out well ahead of time, then consider becoming a level 3 Camel member. And in the meantime, take care from me. All the best. Cheers. Bye.